Hello again. We need to tackle question 3 of the complete dominance questions. And before we get into that, I want to be sure and give you some more background about this term autosomal. You see in every question in this problem set that it says cystic fibrosis is autosomal, sickle cell is autosomal, and now on number 3, Huntington's disease is autosomal. So let's give you a little background on that to make sure that you're comfortable. So as a species, we carry 23 pairs of chromosomes. So any allele that's carried on 1 through 22, whether it's number 1, number 5, number 12, number 20, any of the chromosomes 1 through 22, we call that autosomal. So cystic fibrosis, for instance, is carried on chromosome number 7. So that's why cystic fibrosis is called autosomal, anything 1 to 22. Now, in our species, chromosome number 23, or the pair in number 23, is important. This determines our sex. Maybe you've heard of females being XX and males being XY. The pair of 23rd chromosomes establishes our sex. So any allele that falls on the X chromosome, number 23, we refer to as sex-linked. And this is a whole different problem set that we'll talk about in about 2 weeks. But right now, everything that we're talking about falls between 1 to 22, and so all of the problems that you're working on now are autosomal. All right, so it's a step-by-step process, right? It's the same procedure regardless of the question. So question number 3. Step 1, we need to read the question. So it says Huntington's disease is an autosomal, but get a load of this, dominant genetic disorder. The problems that we've done up to this point, the allele was always recessive, but here the condition is dominant, right? So Huntington's disease is an autosomal dominant genetic disorder that causes the progressive breakdown, means that the cells slowly die. This isn't a fast process. It's a genetic disorder that causes the progressive breakdown of nerve cells in the brain. Your physical and mental abilities deteriorate. They break down. They erode. They deteriorate gradually over time. The person knows that they're mentally and physically fading. It's very, very serious. So it is a degenerative disorder that is dominant. So since the name is Huntington's, let's use H for our letter. So you have your capital H and your lowercase h for your dominant and your recessive. So step 1 is to read the question. Step 2 is to define your alleles. So the problem says that Huntington's disease is dominant, which means that your capital H is your disorder. Now, this is not very common. Most genetic disorders are recessive. That's exactly why I give you this problem. Huntington's is an example of a dominant genetic disorder, which means that the recessive allele, this is your healthy allele. This is your typical allele. All right, so step 1, read the question. Step 2, set up your alleles. Now step 3, we set up our cross. So there's our couple, and let's see what it says. It says, consider the results if a heterozygous individual reproduces with a typical individual. Now, the problem doesn't tell us which is the male and which is the female, and so it's totally up to your choice. So it says, consider the results of a heterozygous individual. Hetero, different, zygous pair. So this is a different pair. So let's make the heterozygote the male. So if he's heterozygous, different pair, he's big H, little h. So then the problem says, consider the results if a heterozygous individual reproduces with a typical individual. So she's typical. Well, if she's typical, she would be little h, little h. She's typical, like such. And he, because he carries and expresses the big H, he is going to suffer from Huntington's. So, step 1, read the problem. Step 2, define your alleles. Step 3, set up your cross. Now, step 4. Step 4, you lay out your Punnett square. So there's your Punnett square for this couple. Put his contribution on the side, put her contribution there. So this allele in the top left box here, this would be big H, little h. This allele, big H, little h. Here and here, little h, here, little h, So, step 1, read the problem. Step 2, alleles. Step 3, your parents. Step 4, your Punnett square. And now step 5, you return to the question. Let's see what we're asking for. So it says 3a, what is the probability of their child having Huntington's? Again, this is what people do for work. Genetic counselors sit down and explain the genetics to couples who are considering having children. So let's play the role of a genetic counselor. What is the probability of their child having Huntington's? Well, Huntington's is the dominant allele. So let's look for the dominant allele in their offspring. 1, 2. So out of 4 different possibilities, 2 out of 4 could have the Huntington allele, or they have a 50% chance of a child with Huntington's. That's really, really serious. They have a 50% chance. Then, question B, or part B. It says, should individuals affected with HD, Huntington's disease, be allowed to reproduce? I'm asking your opinion here. There's no way to get this wrong. Some people say, yes, they should be able to reproduce. It's totally up to them. And other people say, no, you can't do that. There's a 50% chance, and that's cruel or mean or inconsiderate to the child. You should think about this. What would you do if you were in this position? If you had Huntington's and you knew that you had a 50% chance of having a child that would suffer from the same condition, would you still have children? It's something to think about. So then, part C. What is the frequency of Huntington's in Homo sapien live births? D. What's the life expectancy? Are there any ethnic, geographic, or cultural significance to Huntington's? This is where you should have found that in cystic fibrosis, there's an ethnic link to that. Sickle cell anemia, there's an ethnic link to that. Is the same also true in Huntington's? So C, D, and E, this is some work on Google. So A is the actual answer of 50%. B, I'm asking you to consider it. What's your opinion? And then C, D, and E, look it up and find out about Huntington's and what it actually does to us as an individual. Good luck. Have fun.